The anime begins with a young boy named Ryo waking up to find 2 books and a knife on the table in front of him. He walks out of the house and starts exploring his new power, which is manipulating water. Suddenly, he's transported to an unknown place and asks himself in confusion, "Where am I? Really?" That's when an angel appears and asks if he's Ryo. Once he learns that it's Ryo, the angel happily tells him no visitor has come for a long time and he's glad to finally meet someone. The angel reveals the painful truth. Ryo died in an accident. Ryo remembers the accident and realizes the angel is telling the truth, but he says that he knows he'll come back to life again, though he's not sure what he'll do. The angel kindly tells him he's free to do whatever he likes, since he has no assigned mission. Ryo is surprised, thinks for a few seconds, and tells him he just wants to live a peaceful life. The angel explains that he'll return to a world full of magic called Fae, and that about 20% of the people there have magical abilities. He tells Ryo that he'll have water magic since that's what suits him best, and since he wanted a quiet life, he'll be sent to Rondo Forest. The angel tells Ryo there's food inside a small house, enough to last 2 months. Ryo is surprised that the food is frozen inside an ice house, but the angel did this to protect it from monsters so they won't go near it. In his new home, Ryo starts reading books about monsters to learn about them. He's surprised the books are in a strange language, but he can read them easily. He goes outside and starts training his water-based powers. He thinks his power might work with his imagination alone, with no need to speak it out loud. He goes back inside and tries to fill a tub with water, but the water is room temperature. He wishes the water was warmer so he could have a hot bath. He heads outside to gather some wood for a fire, but can't manage to light it, and becomes exhausted from the effort. Lying on the ground, he starts thinking again. He brings out a pot of water and tries to freeze it, but fails at that too. He figures this is tough, and he needs to find out how to make ice. He also wishes he could use the ice spear spell. He focuses on cooling the water and tries to imagine the water molecules and whether he can link oxygen with hydrogen. Finally, he manages to freeze the water because of hydrogen bonds and realizes he can shape the ice however he wants. Afterward, he uses this ice to light the wood on fire, making him really happy. He heads back inside and takes a warm bath just like he wished, feeling incredibly relaxed. His first day feels productive, and he thinks he can make warm water the same way again. Magic really is handy. The next day, he starts eating the food the angel left him. Ryo remembers it'll only last 2 months, so he figures he needs to start hunting before he runs out. He realizes the forest is beyond the barrier, so there will be lots of monsters, and the knife alone won't be enough to hunt them. He'll need attack magic too. It's best for him to start training to live a safe and peaceful life. He heads outside to train again. He fires a ball of water, feeling excited since it's his first successful attack spell, but it doesn't have much power. He figures that makes sense, but doesn't get discouraged, thinking he still has some tricks up his sleeve. He sees that the water ball isn't enough, so he tries using a water gun instead, thinking it'll do better. He narrows the nozzle for a faster stream, but even then, the stream doesn't reach the tree and barely makes a dent, leaving him disappointed. He goes back to the angel and asks how to use magic properly. The angel says the key to magic is imagination, and he needs a clear idea of what he wants to do, and with time, he'll gain experience. Ryo returns to the forest and uses his magic as the angel suggested, noticing big improvement. He goes back inside and manages to fill the tub with warm water by using the opposite of the ice spell. The next day, he starts practicing making ice from the air and actually succeeds, though it's really slow, but at least now it works. This leads to his goal of offensive ice magic, creates an ice spear, but can't launch it very far. He thinks launching ice is harder than launching water, but decides to keep training until he's as good at it as he is with water balls. He tries again with ice arrows, but can't get it right even after a lot of effort, and feels like he might pass out from losing so much of his magical energy. He goes back inside, wanting to light a fire, but can't do it because there's no sun like before, so he faces a new challenge to solve this problem. The next day, he started training again with the ice arrows. After a few days, he managed to shape an ice arrow but couldn't shoot it properly yet. Still, he made a spear and went off on an adventure. He went to the forest outside the barrier, where there were also traces of big monsters. He got closer to the river and found a quartz stone on the bank. He thought this would help him light a fire even after sunset, and that now all he had left was to gather some purifying herbs to declare today's adventure a success. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared behind him. Ryo felt its presence, turned around, and was scared when he saw it. It was a wild boar, which rooted him to the spot in fear. The boar charged at him, but just as it got close, Ryo remembered the previous accident and dodged before the boar could hurt him. The boar charged him again, but this time, Ryo told himself he couldn't move but could still use his magic. He used the power of ice in the boar's path, causing it to slip and fall, then summoned ice arrows, which the boar crashed into, killing it. Rio felt relieved after that. Back home, Rio prepared the boar's hide to use as clothing. He succeeded in lighting a fire indoors without needing the sun and started reading the monster book. He saw that the boar he killed was actually one of the weakest ranks of wild boar, and that the encyclopedia he was reading from was for beginners. The last 2 pages were named as special editions. He read that any dragon could completely destroy a whole city with ease, and that if you met one, you should run away immediately. Rio thought that made sense, as meeting a dragon could mean certain disaster. Then he read about another monster called Akuma, which wasn't a fallen angel, as noted in the book, and it warned that you wouldn't want to meet one. That's when Rio realized how vast the world was because of all the different monsters. The next day, Rio took off his clothes and headed into the forest. He started picking and tasting fruits, enjoying them a lot while wearing his boar fur clothes. While wandering around the forest again, a giant bird attacked, nearly catching him, but he just barely dodged. The bird was so strong it ended up breaking the forest trees. Rio started running away and tried to slow the bird using ice panels. He figured this type of bird used a hidden kind of magic offensive wind magic, but its main weapons were its powerful charges, sharp talons, and beak. He couldn't escape. Rio stopped and shot some water arrows at the bird, but it dodged all his attacks. As the bird got closer, Rio created an ice barrier to protect himself, causing the bird to crash into it and fall to the ground. Rio approached with his weapon aimed at the bird, but the bird quickly flew off, maybe worried Rio would kill it. As it flew, Rio saw the bird had a wound in its eye, which made it fly away from his path. Rio lay down and realized that peaceful life was harder than he expected. It was nightfall, and he was still lost in the forest from running away from the bird, having lost his way back home. He started walking, thinking he might be on the right path, but then saw a lake with a headless body and a horse, which shocked him. The next day, Rio continued wandering the forest, kept killing monsters with ice arrows, and used his spear to fish, then went home and stocked up on fish. He also started training on ice panels. He went to the river, dove deep, and ended up being chased out by a giant octopus. Then, he used his water magic to cut stones. Feeling happy he succeeded. He thought that if he enhanced the ice's hardness with magic, it could work like a grindstone. He also felt that he was starting to master his magic. Next, we're back to the headless body. Rio faced off against it and said to himself that the monster book didn't mention Dullahan monsters, maybe because they're too advanced to be in a beginner's book. Rio didn't care though and attacked it with multiple strikes, but couldn't manage to hurt it. The monster, on the other hand, succeeded in hitting Rio and nearly finished him off with a second blow, but Rio dodged in time, thinking maybe he'd got the upper hand. The monster dodged his attack and hit Rio again, knocking him to the ground. Rio felt utterly exhausted and thought he didn't stand a chance against it, but realized there was a reason the monster was coming to this place every night. He realized that maybe the monster was trying to train him up to reach another level. Then, the monster showed him a sword made of water, which surprised Rio. The monster handed him the sword, and Rio guessed that it wanted him to master it. Rio received the sword, still surprised, and then the monster walked away. Then Rio went back to the forest and faced off with the giant bird again, noticing the scratch in its eye looked darker than before, and wondered if it had evolved. The bird launched wind magic at Rio, but he blocked it by creating ice barriers. Rio was shocked when the bird destroyed the barriers and started running away while defending himself at the same time. The bird kept attacking, and Rio kept making more barriers, even trying ice arrows, but they didn't hit the bird at all. The bird broke through the barriers using its sound powers and attacked Rio, but he dodged. He was amazed by the bird's improved strength. Then Rio got hit with a thunderous attack, knocking him to the ground. The bird pounced and nearly grabbed him with its talons, but he blocked with his new sword. The bird appeared behind him and used wind powers, which Rio managed to block. The bird flew high, ready to attack again, and swooped down, but Rio stabbed it with the sword skillfully, making the bird crash to the ground. Rio approached, thinking the bird was back to take revenge for the injury to its eye and couldn't accept the loss. He asked it to help him become stronger so he could face it again and thanked it for making him feel better. Then he pulled part of the sword out of the bird's body and told it that he knew it had evolved to get revenge, but he was going to finish it now and would show his respect. Then he struck with the full sword until the bird bled and fell dead. A dragon suddenly appeared, flying in the sky, and landed in front of Rio in the forest, shocking him. He was even more surprised when the dragon spoke to him, saying it'd been a long time since it used telepathy and wasn't sure if it still worked. Rio asked him about telepathy, and the dragon asked whether he'd met a bird that had evolved from a killing falcon in that place. Rio replied that he did, and asked if the bird had belonged to the dragon, apologizing if it was. The dragon understood it was defeated, and told Rio it was quite an achievement, noticing that Rio held a rare weapon. When Rio showed the weapon, the dragon said it belonged to the king of fairies, and that since the king gave it to Rio, he must have done something to deserve it. Rio wanted to ask a few questions, but the dragon said he had to go. Rio said he understood and was grateful for everything, but before the dragon left, Rio asked for its name. The dragon said his name was Lewin, then flew high into the sky. Rio never thought he'd talk to a dragon in his life, but in a fantasy world like this, anything was possible. Then we go to the angel, who felt like he was overlooking something. He saw that Rio had a hidden ability and was surprised by this, since the last person with this ability was a girl who'd been sent to another world 0 years ago. In Rio's case, his hidden ability was eternal youth. Rio went to the coast to get some seafood and was shocked by the terrible scene. There were 2 soldiers lying on the ground who had been attacked while sailing by one of the coastal monsters, which led to the destruction of their ship and them drowning. Rio heard one of them groan, which surprised him. Then, we moved to Rio's house, where he brought one of the soldiers. The soldier regained consciousness and had with him a very important necklace. He asked himself where he was, then left the house to explore the area. Rio appeared behind him, which startled the soldier because he hadn't noticed him before and couldn't describe him due to the clothes Rio was wearing. The soldier thought, "This isn't the person I'll tell about what happened to me." Then the soldier introduced himself as Abel and told Rio he was grateful for saving him. Rio told him he hadn't done anything, just brought him to his house, and mentioned he was the only survivor among the soldiers. Abel said they were smugglers and told Rio not to worry about them, which puzzled Rio. Abel felt hungry, so Rio offered to eat while talking, which sounded good to Abel. Rio introduced himself to Abel. Then they moved to the dining table, and Abel asked Rio if he had any clothes. Rio didn't have any garments or materials to make clothes, and couldn't sew them either. Abel asked if Rio could go buy some, but didn't finish the question, thinking Rio probably couldn't afford it because if he had money, he would have gotten necessities for himself. Abel felt he had insulted Rio, who saved his life, but Rio actually lived far from any town or people. Abel guessed Rio hunted the food and asked if Rio also used a certain knife. Rio said he used the knife for 2 things: to defend himself and to clean the animals he hunted. Rio showed Abel he could create water, telling him he was a water mage, which amazed Abel. Abel said only about half the population can do that, even in the central districts, and Abel couldn't do it either. Rio was surprised at the number since he remembered the angel telling him it was only 20%. Abel asked Rio to take him to the coast because he wanted to check something, so they headed there. While walking, Abel asked if Rio had a staff since he was a mage, but Rio didn't have one. Abel thought to himself that was the second time he slipped up and guessed Rio only had a staff but lived in poverty. Abel asked Rio to take the lead in case anything happened, offering to stay behind, but Rio refused. Abel couldn't wait and moved ahead to repay Rio for saving him, and also because he didn't want his reputation tarnished by saving Rio all the time. Rio agreed and told him he'd rely on him. When they reached the coast, the bodies had disappeared. They started searching and thought the bodies were either eaten or washed into the sea. Abel guessed that might have happened to him too if Rio hadn't saved him. Rio confirmed Abel was lucky for that, but Abel said he'd think about it later. Abel told Rio not to be too formal with him because he didn't like being called sir by the man who saved him. Rio did it thinking Abel was older, but then agreed Abel was right and would call him Abel only. Abel thanked Rio, said he treated friends that way and preferred it like that. Rio was surprised Abel called him a friend and looked up, trusting what the angel told him. Abel finished searching the ship but didn't find what he was looking for. Rio asked what he would do now, and Abel said he wanted to meet his friends. He said the town of Lon would be a fresh start, but it seemed like he had drifted far south. Rio wasn't sure where Lon was but thought it required a long trip north. Abel understood he needed to prepare well. Abel then asked Rio if he wanted to come with him. Rio was surprised by the request. Abel knew it was sudden and asked Rio to think it over because he needed his help and had no idea where he was or the way to Lon, so he badly needed a guide. Rio agreed but wanted to prepare and asked Abel to move out tomorrow, and from then on, he'd be his guide. Abel was very happy and shook Rio's hand. Back at Rio's house, he told himself that after arranging his life to be calm, he would now make it exciting. He entered and told Abel he was going to say goodbye to someone. Abel was surprised he would visit this person so late, but Rio only saw him at this time and wanted to tell him he'd be gone for a while. Abel told Rio to be careful and guessed he was going to someone dear because Rio had told him no one lived there. Then Rio met the Fairy King and told him he'd be away starting tomorrow. He thanked the king for everything that helped him stay alive. He said this would be their final battle, so he would fight harder than usual. They fought with strong strikes. Some exchanged quickly in between. scene. After some time, the fight ended, but Rio was extremely exhausted. The fairy king left, but Rio thanked him before he disappeared. The king showed Rio a big water orb and brought it close to him. Inside was battle armor, which made Rio happy as it was for him. He told the king he would wear it proudly. Then the king left. The next day, Abel waited for Rio until he came out wearing the new armor and told him they had to set out now. When Rio stepped away from his house, he looked back longingly, then continued walking through the forest. While walking, they met a wild monster. Abel told Rio to stay back and took care of it himself. He drew his sword and attacked the monster, landing a blow that killed it. Rio was surprised Abel used combat skills and asked about them. Abel said mages usually didn't know combat skills. He explained they were like techniques used by siphoners and others who fought with weapons. Rio understood. Then night fell upon them, and they slept in one of the trees. The next day, they continued to move until they reached a lake filled with lizards. Abel believed that they were very strong in the river, and that defeating them would be difficult. He told Rio to take another path through the forest. As they moved, Rio felt that the lizards were on their way to them, and he informed Abel of this. Abel saw that he needed to prepare well, and Rio also planned to use his magic to fight because there were so many of them. When Abel wanted to warn Rio that he didn't have a staff to fight with, Rio launched a set of ice arrows that killed the lizards. He informed Abel about a large group coming. After they finished dealing with the lizards, Abel asked Rio what kind of spell he had used. Rio told him it was a water spell used to shoot the ice arrows, but Abel was surprised to see Rio launch 4 arrows at once. He thought that arrows were released one at a time in each cast, not all together like Rio did. This was what he knew about the wind mage he was familiar with. However, Rio thought that things might be different with wind magic, but it was normal in water magic. Abel found this strange, but didn't care, and asked Rio to keep moving. However, Rio showed him a cup of water because they needed to drink before moving on. Abel was surprised again and asked Rio why he had changed the spell from let water flow to this now. This surprised Rio, and Abel told him that he was just imagining things. He then moved on. After that, Abel used a coin to determine the direction of the path, and then they walked towards a path called Lun. Rio was amazed as it was the first time he had seen a coin. Abel explained that this coin was a bronze florin used in the kingdom of Nightly, where Lun is located. Rio really liked the name Nightly. Abel told him that in the central provinces, each region produces its own currency, but they all use the same denominations. Rio then asked if the kingdom of Nightly was part of the central provinces. Abel informed him that it is one of 3 main countries, the others being the Debohi state and the Handalio Federation. Rio was curious about the Debohi state, and Abel asked him if he had a problem with it, but Rio simply didn't like the name. Abel saw that this was what was concerning Rio. As they moved to a more open area, there were many stones, and Abel defended himself against an attack from them by splitting a stone in 2. Rio then summoned an ice barrier to protect himself as well, but they found themselves surrounded by stones. Abel expected they were now in a rocky golem's nest, and asked Rio to hold his position while he would deal with the nearest one. He charged in for an attack and struck it hard, causing the stone monster to penetrate, but it didn't seem affected and quickly healed its wound. Abel realized this was of no use, but Rio wanted to try an attack. He showed a 10-layer ice wall, which ended up destroying the rocky monsters. Rio found the kinetic spells very frightening. Abel, in amazement, asked what that was. Rio explained that he had taken care of 2 of the monsters and would use the same spell on the others. They then approached one of the monsters, but it didn't move and had a magical stone. Rio figured that it was theirs now, and that it was a loot that he wanted to gather from the other stones too, but that wasn't feasible right now. They moved to another location, where they came across a huge hippopotamus, and a group of wyverns was on the way to the hippopotamus. The hippopotamus was well prepared for the wyverns, and ended up launching sound waves at them, which led to their extermination, causing Abel and Rio to be astonished. Rio was very excited about this. As night fell, they made a fire. Abel was surprised at the dispelling spell used by the hippopotamus, as he had heard that it has this effect. Rio was very interested in the dispel and wanted to discover one for himself. But Abel halted him, saying he was lucky because the dispel was found in Lun in the central provinces. Rio was annoyed for being kept in the dark about it, but that was never Abel's intention, as he didn't know Rio was interested in the dispel at all. Rio then asked Abel if there were other things he had forgotten to tell him. Abel replied that he assumed Rio knew about the dwarves and elves, right? However, Rio asked Abel to give him the details. Abel clarified that the dwarves were skilled craftsmen and fierce fighters, and there were some of them in Lun, but there weren't many elves there since they lived in the forest and didn't want to live outside it. Rio understood this and had believed so as well. The next day, they wore the clothing of the beast they had hunted, and Rio said that after they crossed these mountains, they would meet the lands of humans. Abil confirmed this and asked Rio where he got this information. He recalled his previous conversation with the dragon about the existence of another continent. The dragon had told him that this land was surrounded by sea on the east, west, and south, with a range of mountains to the north separating it from the neighboring continent. Therefore, it was unlikely they would encounter any humans coming from the south from their lands in the north. He then returned to focus and told Abil that it was better not to know where he got his information from, as it could be knowledge that transcended human boundaries. They continued walking but heard a noise coming from within the mountains. Suddenly, a monster made of birds appeared, and Abil felt intense fear. However, Rio threw food to the monster, and Abil did the same, which resulted in the monster grabbing the food and flying away. Rio felt happy because they succeeded in this, as did Abil. They continued to move, but Abil felt that this monster left them with an unforgettable impression, and Rio believed they would have been in danger if they had fought it. However, Abil thought humans weren't created to fight such monsters, and hadn't encountered any behemoths or griffins for centuries. He believed that something was wrong in this area, but Rio felt that Abil was hurting him with his words, stating that it was humans who didn't put in the effort. Abil then asked, what was the point of putting in that effort anyway? They headed north, and Rio believed that the wyverns had come from the north until they found some of them. Abil didn't want that and wondered what they would do, but Rio anticipated they would fight. Abil saw that the wyverns were much stronger than them, and that it would be difficult for just the two of them to confront them, as catching them would require about 10 very strong adventurers, and even then, there would be losses. However, Rio felt that they might face a decent number of them and possibly wouldn't be able to avoid a fight. He asked if it wouldn't be easy to fight them while they were focused on the ground. Abil thought so too, and he presumed he could reach them with his sword. Rio then stepped forward to settle the matter, and Abil followed him. Rio cast the ice arrow spell, and as the wyverns were hit by the ice arrows, Abil attacked immediately until other monsters appeared and charged at him, but he dodged their attack. Rio then launched arrows at them as well, and succeeded in hitting them. When they fell, Rio asked Abil to go and collect their magical stones. Abil thought this was very easy, but then Rio asked Abil if he was expecting a decisive battle that made his heart race. However, Abil didn't want that at all, and asked Rio to stick to their plans because they were ideal. Rio had no objection as long as Abil was okay with it. Then another group of wyverns appeared heading toward them, but Abil wasn't afraid this time and told Rio to eliminate this group too. Rio thought that Abil was addicted to battles, but Abil wasn't like that. These monsters were just blocking their way, and they would fight them now or later. He charged in, and Rio followed suit. After that, they continued walking until they felt happy because they reached the place they wanted. Rio and Abel continued on their way towards the city of Lune. Rio thought he was enjoying killing wyvern monsters, but Abel asked him to be quiet, saying it was better not to encounter them. Even though they had collected many stones as an unexpected reward, they stopped to determine their exact location. Rio hoped they weren't in Dupuy, but Abel didn't think so since they were much farther north of the kingdom, which was unlikely, making Rio feel relieved. Abel wondered about Rio's hostility toward Dupuy, but Rio said he didn't have any issues with them. It was just their name that was a completely different story. Rio pointed out a road going from east to west, then looked to the side and saw mountains. He told them if they took this road, they would reach Kaladi town. Rio was happy to find a nearby town because he missed sleeping on a bed, though Abel thought he wanted to kill more wyverns. Rio said this was different, and they began walking again. Abel also wanted to rest, but was looking forward to the town's delicious food. They went to a tavern, and Abel asked Rio to register with the Adventurers Guild because he could use the guild card as identification. Once he had it, cities and states alike would waive entry fees. When they arrived at this place, Abel had vouched for him and paid silver coins. Rio thought that since Abel paid a silver piece for him, he was now in Abel's service, but Abel wasn't that rude. Rio had forgotten that Abel was a respectable man who didn't haggle over every piece he paid, and Rio was very grateful to him, which made Abel feel he was eccentric. Abel mentioned another advantage of visiting the guild. They buy stones and monster parts for good prices, though you'd need to be an alchemist to benefit fully. The waitress brought them food, which greatly surprised Rio. Abel asked if the food was delicious, wasn't it? Rio was astonished to find curry and rice, believing that curry was important and essential in reincarnation stories. He continued to be amazed for a long time. Abel wondered about this and asked if something was wrong, but Rio was talking to himself a lot and asked him not to worry about it. Abel asked him to start eating, and when Rio tasted the curry, he really liked it and began eating quickly. Abel told him if he wanted more, he could order again. When Rio finished his plate, he ordered more from the waitress. Then he asked Abel if this curry was available in Loon City. Abel told him he could have it any time because it was available there in large quantities. Abel was happy that Rio enjoyed the curry. The next day, they continued walking together. Rio told Abel that he really liked the curry, and Abel was happy about this, but Rio thought this was another secret Abel had kept from him. He asked if there was anything else important he hadn't mentioned. He told Abel he liked sweets, and asked him to reveal the best town for making sweets. Abel said he would think about it, and they continued walking. They lay on the ground, had some food, and then continued on. Loon City appeared before them, and Abel told Rio this was the city surrounded by wheat fields. As they approached the city, the guard recognized Abel and was surprised to see him. Abel greeted him, and the guard thought he had been lost. Abel confirmed he had been but managed to return alive thanks to Rio. The guard thanked Rio for saving Abel and shook his hand firmly. Abel paid another coin to the guard to allow Rio into the city and showed him his guild card. The guard welcomed Abel and asked if he was going directly to the guild. Rio felt happy for Abel returning to his homeland again. They entered the city, and Abel decided to head to the guild to register Rio. He told him that he would start at rank W when registering with the guild, but with the approval of a rank B adventurer or higher, he could start at rank E or D. Rio thought Abel was higher than rank B and was very proud of this, but Abel wasn't confident about it. He told Rio that as his rank increased, the level of missions he could accept would rise, and they would come with greater rewards. He recommended accepting them since Rio would need money. Rio asked if these things were that valuable, but Abel thought they were rarer than Rio believed, and selling them all at once might cause the market price to collapse. However, he was confident the guild leader would find a solution for this matter. They reached the guild and entered. Everyone was amazed at Abel's arrival, and happiness spread among the adventurers. They approached him to welcome him warmly, showing he had great popularity. Rio was surprised by this, but stepped aside so as not to block anyone's way. He walked alone until Abel was finished and met one of the girls who stared at him closely. She told him the outfit he was wearing belonged to one of the fairy kings and that it caught her attention when she saw him. She told him he must have earned its approval and thought he was an interesting person. Then she left because she had something to finish and hoped to meet him again. Abel came out of the guild looking for Rio and asked him to come back inside. When Rio entered the guild, Abel introduced him to the adventurers as the one who had saved his life and who would be registered in the guild as an adventurer. He asked them to take care of him. Rio stepped forward to greet the adventurers, and they greeted him back, grateful that he had saved Abel from death, which made Rio feel happy. They went to the employee, and Abel asked her to register Rio, saying he would be registered as rank D with Abel's endorsement. The employee was surprised that Abel was vouching for Rio because no one from the Crimson Sword group had ever vouched for anyone before. But Abel knew Rio had great power, and the employee didn't object to his endorsement. However, the process needed actual proof of physical strength. Abel hoped to talk to the guild leader about this matter and other side issues. The employee confirmed she would call him for them and asked them to wait in the waiting room. They moved to the waiting room, and the leader came in to see them. He was very worried about Abel and told him it was good that he was okay. Abel apologized to the leader for making him worry, but the leader said he nearly had a heart attack when Abel's news was cut off. He asked if this was the magician, and Abel introduced Rio to the leader as the one who saved his life. The leader introduced himself to Rio as Hugh and thanked Rio for saving Abel, but Rio told him he didn't do anything and was just in the right place at the right time. Abel asked the guild leader to register Rio and raise his registration rank with his endorsement. Hugh didn't object at all but wanted Rio to provide proof. Abel told the leader he appreciated this but warned him that Rio was much stronger than him, which surprised Hugh. Then Abel showed the stones they had collected on their way here. Hugh expected these green stones indicated the wind element, judging by their size and bright color. He asked, surprised, were they from wyverns? When he learned this from Abel, he was even more surprised. He said this quantity would require a large number of soldiers, even a whole army. But Abel wasn't worried about this and said they had hunted these wyverns south of the Mountains of Doom, which shocked Hugh. Rio was surprised to learn they were the Mountains of Doom. Abel told him that after finding the road to Kailati, he realized where they had been and explained that he had passed through these mountains. Rio thought this name sounded evil to the ears. Hugh had heard that no one passes through the Mountains of Doom and comes out alive, and normal people or adventurers don't approach them without a good reason. And now they were telling him they had passed through there? Abel asked if this was enough evidence to raise Rio's rank, but for Hugh, it was more than enough. Then the rest of Abel's team also came to check on him, and Abel thanked them for their concern. After that, Hugh said he would leave since Abel had a lot to talk about with his friends, and asked the staff member to bring Rio's registration papers to his office to finish that up. When Rio was about to leave, Abel stopped him and told him he'd wait for him in the reception area because there was something he wanted to show him. Rio then went with Hugh to Hugh's office. Hugh explained that these were Abel's friends, the rest of the Crimson Sword team that Abel had joined, who were the most popular and talented in town. Rio entered the office and asked Hugh if he needed to register at rank D, but Hugh already knew how skilled Abel was, said Abel was talented, and that he knew for sure Abel couldn't have killed the wyvern alone, which meant Rio was naturally talented and qualified for rank D. When Hugh tested him, he found out Rio was a mage and physically strong. Then the staff member, Nina, arrived with the registration tools. Hugh asked Nina to explain to Rio how things worked while he handled the paperwork. Nina introduced herself to Rio and welcomed him. Rio did the same. Nina started asking Rio if he was a mage, and when she learned he was, she asked what magic element he used, and he told her it was water. She asked where he lived, but guessed he probably hadn't decided yet since he'd just arrived in town. Nina explained that he could stay in the guild's dorms for the next 300 days after registering and asked him to remember that. She then asked if he had ever visited a dungeon before, but Rio hadn't. The guild offered an introductory course to dungeon exploration every month, which gave adventurers helpful info and tips for when they went inside. This surprised Rio, and he was eager to attend. She told him the course would start the day after tomorrow, registered him for it, and told him to be there at 9 o'clock. She mentioned the town square had a clock so he could keep track of the time, then said the interview was over. Now it was time for the actual registration. She asked him to put his hands on a crystal, and after he did, the registration process was complete, and she gave him his card. It was official now. Then Nina left. Hugh felt very relieved, since things had felt grim when they lost touch with Abel, but it was good that he came back. They owed Rio for this, and now they had to spread the news about Abel's return. Rio then went over to Abel and asked where they were going. Abel was off to collect his reward for escorting Rio, and wanted to buy new clothes and a staff for him once they got there. Rio found Abel to be very generous and asked why he needed a staff. Abel thought it was strange for a mage like Rio not to have one, but Rio explained he could use magic without a staff, and that he fought with a sword in close combat. Abel was surprised that Rio could use a sword, though he didn't see him carrying one, so Rio showed it to him. Abel thought it was a knife, not a sword, and was really surprised, but Rio wanted to ask Abel a question because he'd realized a lot of things he hadn't understood before. Abel asked what they were, and then Rio went off to sit alone, where he discovered that clothes were measured in centimeters, the day was 24 hours, the week was 7 days, and the month was 30 days. Looking at this and at the currency, he thought it couldn't be a coincidence. Maybe someone else had come to this world before, or been reincarnated in the past, and had a big influence. Abel came out to Rio, and Rio thanked him for paying, but Abel was just glad Rio got what he needed. Rio asked if they were going anywhere else. Abel said they should, since Rio was their guest. They went to the tavern and had a celebration for Abel's return, and recognized that it was thanks to Rio as well. The next day, Rio went with Nina, but was very tired. Nina told him everyone was grateful, but Rio didn't mind their gratitude. They entered the guild, where Nina welcomed the new adventurers and told them Rio would be joining them in room 15 starting today. Rio greeted everyone, and one of the adventurers introduced himself as Nils, and this is Ito, and shook Rio's hand. Nina said she'd go to her office, and Rio thanked her for showing him the way. When she left, Nils was very taken with Nina, but Ito told him he'd only seen her for a second, and said that front desk staff had lots of admirers, so he had no shot. Nils knew that, but said he could still dream of having a wonderful wife and being someone important. Ito didn't care for this talk and welcomed Rio, asking to keep things casual between them, which Rio agreed to. Ito was happy about that and was just worried about ending up with someone like Dan from room 1. Nina came back and told them there was a new adventurer looking for a place to stay. He came over and introduced himself as Eamon. Nils saw that Eamon was really young and didn't seem like an adult, but Eamon had just turned 16, and his whole family had passed away, so he decided to become an adventurer and came to this town. Ito suspected that was the case for most people here. Nina said Eamon would also attend the dungeon exploration course tomorrow and could go with Rio. Rio welcomed him. Then we moved to Abel and his team. Lynn was angry about Rio joining them. It's true that the ice wall is a sort of water magic, but it's so thin that a wind sword could break it, and she didn't believe the claim that his body was tough. It was impossible. Abel told her that's what Rio did, but Lynn insisted you could only physically manifest magic in close range, and told him not to talk about just forming a spell, since Abel was saying Rio did it from a distance. Lynn found that impossible, just basic common sense. Rihia asked Lynn to calm down and said Abel just told them what he saw, but Lynn insisted Rio wasn't fit to join them, and what he did with the wyvern was nonsense. Abel said that was true if you just thought about it, but he was sure of what he saw. Rihia said the only person she'd heard of doing anything like that was the famous Blazing Flame Mage, but Abel said that guy could burn 1,000 soldiers with one chant, turn a wyvern to ash in a single spell, and wipe out a whole town with one spell. Just rumors though, and the comparison was a bit much. Rihia thought if everything Abel said was true, then Rio was really amazing, and if he decided to turn on them, they'd be doomed. Lin thought the worst possible scenario would be Rio joining the Empire. Abel assured them that wouldn't happen, and Rihia was amazed by how confident he was. That confidence was all because of the Dibohi Empire's name, which surprised them all. Then we switched to Rio and his new friends in their room, and they were really happy. Rio and his friends moved to the special class to learn the professional course on the basics of Deimos exploration. They would later go to a real Deimos, which made Amon anxious. Rio told him they had plenty of time before going and asked him not to stress so he wouldn't break down by noon. The teacher then told them that before they left, he would answer all their questions and asked if anyone wanted to ask something. Rio raised his hand and asked if there was a way to instantly travel to a level that had been previously cleared. The teacher was very impressed with Rio's question and said that some Deimos in the southern provinces had this technology, but none in Loon City had it. He had heard rumors but couldn't confirm any details. Rio understood and thanked him. Amon then asked Rio what instant travel was, surprised by Rio's knowledge despite being rank D, but Rio had only heard about this information. They moved to the city's Deimos, located in the center of the city. The number of monsters doubled completely every year, and they didn't know why. They advanced into the Deimos, and the teacher explained that the wall was built to prevent monsters from entering the city. Rio thought that the outer wall protected the city from external attackers, while these inner walls protected it from the internal Deimos monsters. Amon felt like a great disaster was about to happen, but the teacher reassured him that this happened every few years and was likely to happen soon, so there was no need to worry. He pointed out the guild building near the gate where people usually register when entering Deimos, but since they were already registered, they would enter directly. Rio asked Amon to calm down and take a deep breath, which made him feel slightly better. Rio told him not to worry as they were all there with him. They moved to the first level, which didn't have dangerous monsters, and could explore it on their own, but the teacher warned them not to go far from the Deimos gate. Rio and Amon moved together, then stopped as Rio sensed something ahead. Amon drew his sword, but Rio located it directly in front of them, but at a distance. Rio asked Amon to attack after he immobilized it, and Amon agreed. A soldier ant appeared, which was a beginner monster. Rio saw that the easiest way to deal with it was to attack its neck. Amon prepared as Rio successfully immobilized the ant and asked Amon to attack. Amon struck and stabbed his sword into the ant's neck, earning encouragement from Rio. Amon felt happy about his success. Rio decided to take its magic stone as a souvenir of their first hunt. Amon asked if this was allowed, but Rio told him they were adventurers and naturally earned their strength from Deimos. Rio showed the stone to Amon, telling him it was a great memento, which amazed Amon. Later at Rio and Amon's residence, they were celebrating Rio and Amon's completion of their first mission in Deimos. Nils drank his beverage, wishing it was wine, but Ito told him they don't serve alcohol there and aren't allowed to bring it either. He thought this was their way of telling adventurers they couldn't drink excessively, but Nils was celebrating and didn't see a problem with it. Ito admired Rio and Amon's courage for killing their first soldier ant on their first visit to Deimos. Amon had killed it after Rio immobilized it. Rio said Amon delivered a skillful fatal blow to the ant, and there was no need for modesty. But for Nils, the most important thing was that they obtained the magic stone, which was also great. Ito asked Rio and Amon what they would do tomorrow. Amon thought about returning to Deimos, but was nervous about going alone and unsure about this step. Rio asked Amon if he wanted to go with him, even to the third level, which made Amon very happy and eager. But Rio was still preoccupied with seeing the ant on the first level, as the lecture suggested that was unusual. Nils thought the first level contained bats, and Ito had heard reports of soldier ants appearing on the first and second levels in recent months. Rio wondered why it was there. Then Abel appeared and told them that soldier ants could dig tunnels up to the first level. Rio told Abel that veteran adventurers shouldn't bother new ones, but Abel was just providing information to reassure them. He asked if they were Rio's 3 roommates. He introduced himself as Abel and said that Rio was strong but had some personality issues and asked them to take care of him. Ito and Amon were amazed by Abel's presence. Nils stood up, introduced himself to Abel, and told him he was his favorite hero and would be grateful if he shook his hand. Abel didn't refuse and shook Nils's hand, advising him not to overexert himself, to work hard, and reminding him that staying alive is the most important thing for an adventurer. Nils assured him he would work hard sensibly. Rio then asked Abel what brought him to the guild at this time. Abel told him that the mission they had accepted took longer than expected, so they returned now. The rest of Abel's team appeared, with Lin angry about Abel being in Rio's room. Reha asked Abel to stop running away, saying they needed to report to the guild leader, but Abel was fulfilling his duty to guide the new generation. For the adventurers, then Lin asked Warren to deal with Abel. Then Warren stepped forward and carried Abel, which led to Abel's annoyance at this, and he asked Rio to act. After that, Lin approached Rio and looked at him a lot, and Rio asked her if there was something wrong, until Reihayan called out to Lin to go, and Reihaya apologized to Rio because they took Abel, but they had to go to the guild leader to present a report to him. Rio expected this since he was their team leader, so he had to go, of course. But Abel saw that Rio was deceptive like this, but Eamon was amazed at what happened in front of him now. Ido was very amazed to see Reihaya, and that she resembled a real angel, and Nils was very impressed with Abel, but Rio asked Nils what he liked about him like this. Then we moved to Abel's team as he was on his way to the guild leader. He told Lin that she shouldn't stare at Rio like that, but Lin wondered if Rio was a magician, as they say, so how could she not be interested in him? Reihaya thought she was right, but Abel assured them that they would see this with their own eyes, and they would get to know his power soon. The next day, Eamon was in a hurry, but Rio saw no need for this. Then they moved to the Demis gate to register entry. After entering Demis, 2 wolves attacked them. Rio managed to pin one of them with ice arrows, but the other wolf attacked Eamon. However, Eamon was ready for it and delivered a strong blow to it. Another wolf appeared that almost killed Eamon, but the wolf received ice arrows in its body that led to keeping it away from facing Eamon. Then Eamon succeeded in defeating it, but Eamon felt very tired after that. But Rio approached him and told him he did well and extended his hand to shake hands with him, and Eamon shook hands with him. After that, Rio saw that Eamon's use of the sword resembled Abel's use and that he had been training under a teacher in his village. Amon confirmed this and told him that his teacher in the village was called Kiro and that he learned in the royal capital and had his famous style in the Hayom school, and this was the source of Amon's style. Rio thought that once Amon got used to things, he would become very strong. But Amon thought Rio was a magician, but he was also knowledgeable in sword use. But Rio had a teacher he trained with for a while, and since his style was his own invention, he didn't think he could describe himself as knowledgeable in sword use. Then he asked him if he had caught his breath. Amon assured him that he was fine now, but Rio asked Amon not to exhaust himself and told him that his fighting style was very exhausting, but if he mastered it, it would prevent him from getting injured, and that it was a new safe style. More important than this was raising his fitness, and he gave him advice to run as much as possible, and continuing that would be the path to improvement. Then he told him that he traveled with Abel for a considerable period, and he always started his day training on his basics. He might be talented in sword use, but even geniuses need hard work. But Eamon was enthusiastic and said he would work hard like Abel, and Rio saw that this was the required spirit. The next day, Rio didn't go to Demis and had other plans. Then Rio went to the library, and the employee directed him to the chemistry books section and advised him to start from here. Then Rio gathered the books he would benefit from, but he didn't know where to start. Then he went to sit alone outside, and while the sun was shining, something strange happened that covered the sunlight, which was an eclipse, which led to Rio being very tense. Then Rio received a strong fire strike, but he managed to deflect it. Then a girl appeared to him using fire power and approaching him, saying that there was a human involved in the matter, but she would get rid of him. Rio asked himself if this was an Akuma. Then the girl showed fire, but Rio prepared for it with magical enhancement and showed many ice plates. Rio confronted another fire strike from her, but she also used wind power, but Rio managed to confront it too, which led to the girl's amazement at this. Then the girl approached him and showed her personal weapon, and threatened him that she would finish him off. Then she directed a strike at him, but he confronted it through his sword. But the girl didn't despair and directed several strikes at him and almost hit him, but Rio confronted her strikes. Then sunlight began to appear again. Then Rio showed a group of ice arrows and threw them at the girl, but the girl was fast and escaped from all the arrows, which led to Rio's amazement at this. He thought she was using wind speed to enhance her movement. Then the girl flew high and attacked Rio, but he confronted her strike again until she moved away from him. Then the girl showed a fireball, but Rio succeeded in overcoming it before she threw it at him. He thought this was strange to come from her, but she didn't despair and attacked him again, and directed several strikes at him, but Rio was also in a defensive position. But Rio showed a group of arrows and threw them at her, but the girl used fire power to confront them and also used earth power and created barriers, but she didn't succeed in avoiding the arrows and was injured with wounds on her body. Rio thought this was the right time to attack and attacked, and flew high to direct a strike at her, but the girl was ready for him and confronted his strike. But Rio was surprised by the girl's wounds healing at a terrible speed, and this led to his distraction, and the girl succeeded in pushing him away from her and colliding with the building. She showed a fireball, but she found a group of water balls falling on her, and when the first drop touched her, it led to her being burned, which led to the girl feeling severe pain. She used earth power to protect herself. Then the girl showed tremendous firepower after that, but the sun was about to show its light, and the girl hid her sword hard and told Rio that time had run out for her, and this was something that annoyed her, but she hadn't enjoyed a fight like this for a long time and it was really enjoyable. Rio asked her to leave quickly now, but the girl thought he also enjoyed it and that she wanted to continue having fun, and this isolated place was a special case, and she had limited authority in it. Rio wondered what isolated meant. Then the girl introduced herself to Rio and said she was called Leonor, and asked Rio about his name. Then Rio told her his name and pronounced her name as Akuma, which led to Leonor's surprise that he knew who they were, and she should have gotten rid of him, but he wasn't an opponent who could be killed in a short period of time. When sunlight was about to appear completely, she told him she wanted to meet him again, but Rio didn't hope for this to happen. But Leonor told him it was impossible for them not to meet again, and if it wasn't with her, it would be with someone else from the Akuma. But she asked him not to allow anyone else to kill him except her because his life had become hers now. She would be stronger in their next meeting. Then she disappeared. Rio said to himself that he survived by a miracle, and if it weren't for this outfit, there would be a hole in his shoulder, and he was exhausted now and suffering from dizziness. Then Rio went to the guild and had a bag of money with him. He didn't think this money was available in his account, and that the guild leader had exchanged the wyvern stones very quickly, and he wasn't worried about money now and didn't need to work hard anymore. Then he looked at his room and didn't find any of his colleagues. Then he headed to the library to buy books, but he looked from the window and saw his dormitory colleagues lying on the ground after being beaten by one of the other students. Nils thought that if they weren't exhausted, they would have beaten them too, but one of the bad students thought this threat was also empty. Ito saw that this was big talk from the person who ambushed them, but the bad man asked them if the monsters in Demas would remind them before attacking them. But the bad man's henchmen fell to the ground, and this was through Rio directing strikes at them. He told the bad man he was right, and he didn't have to remind him before attacking him and his friends. Then Nils told Rio that this villain was Dan from room 1, and Rio said he was Dan and asked him what he wanted now, and asked him if he was ready to drag the tales of failure after defeating his companions. But Dan got angry and attacked Rio, but Rio avoided the attack and directed a strike at Dan, which led to knocking him to the ground. Nils saw that Rio hurt Dan severely, and Rio thought his nerves were tense from the previous fight. Then Rio showed a healing potion and started with Ito because he was a priest, and that they share Amon with them in training now. But Nils felt humiliated by that, and Rio saw that they all needed some endurance and offered them to take a rest together. Then they moved to bathe, and Ito cast a healing spell on Rio and succeeded in healing Rio from his pain. Rio felt happy about this and made sure that Ito was indeed a priest and thanked him. Ito explained to Rio that this strike didn't break bones, but it was really severe, and if it had been in his heart, it would have been a very serious injury. Rio told him it was targeting his heart, but Rio avoided this strike at the last moment, and it was good that he survived. Nils asked Rio since he was very strong, yet he avoided the strike. Eamon wondered who exactly he was fighting with, but Rio told them if he got the chance, he would tell them everything someday. Then he said to himself that Leonor was from the Akuma, and from her words he thought there were many of them, and he had to discover this world. We move on to Demas, where Amon and his friends were fighting one of the goblin monsters. Nils managed to block the monster's arrows until Amon attacked the monster and finished it off. Then Ito healed Amon's wound, and Amon thanked him a lot. After that, Nils found the monster's magic stone, and Ito thought this seemed like a really bad omen because goblin archers aren't supposed to exist on the 5th floor. Nils thought they should leave now, which surprised Amon that they would be heading back so quickly, but Nils doesn't like to take risks, and follows the saying that survival comes first. Ito remembered he heard this motto from Abel before, but Nils asked them, "Isn't it obvious that your lives should be the priority?" After that, they left. Meanwhile, on the other side of Demas, a huge goblin was killing one of the adventurers. Then we moved to Rio, who was outside the city. He thought that Leonor's magic yesterday was amazing, and he remembered fighting her. He was impressed by her speed, and thought he should work on his strengths and fix his weaknesses so they would turn into strengths. He realized that quick movements were what Leonor used to get close to him and figured it was wind magic. He envied her great proficiency in using wind magic, but since he didn't have that kind of power to begin with, there was no point in being jealous. He thought he should come up with a way to make his own water magic faster. He figured the best use was with the water gun, but he'd only used it underwater so far and didn't think it would work on land. Then he created an icy path and imagined himself pushing off from points all along his back. Suddenly, the water gun appeared behind him and pushed him forward a bit, but then Rio fell to the ground, thinking he'd outdone himself. He stopped and hid the icy path, thinking the water gun needed to be improved, and wondered if it might work if he used 1,024 water guns. After that, he headed to the library in the city. We then moved to the library, where Lynn was searching for forbidden spellbooks, but didn't find anything. She thought it made sense that there wasn't any magic that could create a thick ice wall in the air or an ice spear capable of piercing a wyvern's defenses. She put the book back in its place, but thought that casting spells like these required someone of the Hell Mage level from the Empire. Then Sira came to Lynn. Lynn greeted her, and Sierra was surprised to find Lin searching for something in the library. Lin told her she was looking for something but didn't find it. Then Lin asked Sierra if she had been on a mission to the royal capital away from Lune. Sierra said that she had, and that she'd only just come back but had an envoy waiting for her, so she asked Lin if they could talk later, then left. Then we moved to the guild. As usual, Nils hesitated to talk in front of Nina, the guild receptionist, until Ito hit him on his head to make him speak properly. Nina welcomed them back from their mission and noted it was a quick trip, but Ito told her it was brief for several reasons. They then showed her the magic stones, and Nina noticed they were goblin archer stones, but said goblin archers hadn't been seen on the 5th floor for years. Ito had suspected the same thing and told the guild receptionist. Nina quickly ran to the guild master to tell him about it and thanked them for the tip. Then Ito suggested they go sell the magic stones. Nils kept staring at Nina because he liked her so much, but Amon dragged him away. We moved to the guild master, who thought that goblin archers should only appear on the 10th floor, so this could be a sign that something's going on. He asked Nina how many B rankers were in town, and she told him there were only 2, the Crimson Sword and the White Banner. The guildmaster asked if the main force of the banner, led by Phillips, was present. Nina confirmed that they were, since they had returned 2 days ago from a mission and were probably still in town. The master asked Nina to bring both groups to his office to tell them about this, and she went. Then we moved to Abel and his team headed to the guildmaster's office, wondering how he's going to deal with the banner team since they'll be at the meeting too. Rihia said it was too late to worry about that, and asked if they had some kind of past connection. Lin thought Abel never stops complaining and needed to learn from Warren. They arrived at the office. Abel knocked on the door and went in to find the guildmaster and the banner team waiting. Phillips, the banner's leader, greeted Abel, and Abel greeted him back. The master started talking, thanked everyone for coming, and told them Nina had explained everything. Abel asked if they were sure about this, and the master confirmed it completely. He told them adventurers just came back from Demas with magic stones. Phillips figured the intel was solid and asked what they needed to do. The master asked both teams to enter Demas and check for any signs of a great mana surge, since this would mean a huge increase in monster numbers. He said it's been about 10 years since the last surge, and he expects another at any moment. Rihia thought that the appearance of goblin archers on the 5th floor was a sign too. Then the master told them the mission's reward. They'd get 100 gold pieces up front and 200 after finishing the job. Abel wanted to be sure and asked if their only job was to check if the surge is coming. The master said that was exactly what he wanted to know. Phillips wondered if the surge had already started. The master told them that if they confirmed it, they should get back to the surface as fast as possible, because they would evacuate the Demas entrance, set up at the double walls, and the area knights would join them. He'd already planned it out. Abel was struck that the master had planned everything and was sure the surge had started already, but the master said there was no harm in being prepared. If it really was the great mana surge, they would need every bit of strength they could. Phillips asked when they would leave, and the master answered at sunrise tomorrow, since an announcement had already gone out that Demas was closed. He asked if they accepted the mission, and both agreed. Then we returned to Rio and his friends at home. Nils woke up and asked Rio if he was heading out already. Rio told him he was going to the north branch of the library, also for Akuma's sake. Ito thought it made sense for Rio to go to the library, since only D rank and above adventurers are allowed in, and Rio qualified. Eamon asked if they had any forbidden texts, but Ito said you had to be B rank to get access to those. Rio was disappointed, but Nils was sure Rio would reach B rank soon. Then Rio told them they should get ready to go to Demas too, wished them luck, and left for the library. Rio paid to enter and was super happy when he got in. Even though he loved the place, he still had to ask where the books he needed were. He used the stairs to go up, and when he got to the top, he saw Sierra reading a book and was surprised to see her there. Back to Demas, both teams got ready to enter, greeted each other, and Abel saw that Phillips had brought 20 warriors, about half the banner team, and they were also bringing C-rank adventurers and above with them. The master asked everyone to move since all were present. Right as he was about to open the Demas gate, Abel told the master to wait because he sensed something strange. Then he asked Lin to use a wind magic probe to scan the first floor. When Lin used her power, a lot of monsters appeared. She told the others about the large number of monsters waiting for them. Phelps thought that a great material abundance was just around the corner, and Abel had expected this. Immediately, the leader asked everyone to withdraw because the monsters would arrive any second, which led Phelps and Abel to leave at once and close the Daima gate. Next, we moved to the guild, where the adventurers saw the notice about the Daima's closure. Ito guessed it was because of the monsters that appeared on the 5th level. Then, one of the adventurers came and told everyone that the material abundance had already started and that the monsters had begun appearing. He said it was a top priority emergency mission and asked them to take positions on top of the walls and get ready for battle. The adventurers headed out right away. Then we moved to Rio in the library, where Sarah told him that he was the person she had met before and thought he was a local adventurer. She approached him and introduced herself with a handshake, and Rio did the same. Sarah felt like they would meet again and asked him why he came to the library. Rio told her he was looking for books about alchemy, which surprised Sarah since it was unusual for her. But Rio said he wasn't in a rush, he just wanted to eventually create a golem. Sarah was surprised by this and thought he was very ambitious, but she didn't think there were any books here specifically about making golems. There were, however, some books that contained useful information that would help him. She asked him to come with her so she could show him what he needed. Rio asked Sarah if she minded, but she said she didn't mind at all, which surprised Rio. Rio and Sarah walked together, and Sarah asked Rio if he liked books. Rio answered yes. He liked them a lot, but he hadn't read any for a long time. Sarah felt that he was talking as if it were in the distant past. Rio asked Sarah if she was an elf, and she confirmed it, saying she was also an adventurer like him. She told him that elves were very few in human territories, and that she probably seemed a little strange, but even so, she was glad she met him. They continued searching together. Then we moved to the Daima Gates, where the outer gates were closed and all the adventurers were on the walls, fully ready, with the guild leader at their head. The leader sensed their arrival right before some monsters broke through one of the Daima gates to get out, and many monsters appeared. The leader immediately told the adventurers to attack the monsters. The archers started shooting arrows, and the magic users launched fire spells, taking down a lot of monsters. But the monsters also used bows and tried to shoot arrows back, almost injuring Reha and Lin, but Warren stopped the monsters' arrows. Everyone, including Abel and Phelps, was shooting arrows. Some adventurers got injured, but they were healed with magic. The commander of the soldiers, Margrave, showed up on the northern side with his men and ordered them to secure that side, which surprised Abel. The leader was happy because he'd had a meeting with Commander Neville the previous day. Margrave's soldiers also shot arrows at the monsters. The leader was shocked by the huge number of monsters and how it kept increasing. There had never been so many before. Still, the adventurers managed to take down large numbers of monsters, but the monsters almost reached them. Phelps told the adventurers to drink water because the battle would last long, and up until now, they'd only fought goblins and goblin archers. Abel told Lynn to save her magic power because the fight was long, and asked if she had a spell that could wipe them all out in one shot. If so, she should use it. This made Lynn upset because she didn't have such a spell. Reha ran out of arrows, but one of the adventurers said they had collected arrows from every weapons shop in the city. The leader told them to hurry up with distributing the arrows. Nils gave Abel some arrows, and Abel thanked him. But Nils had a message for Abel, saying the guild leader believed there might be a huge monster waiting behind these small groups of monsters, and that the Crimson Sword team should be ready to face it. Abel assured him that they were ready and told Nils to tell the leader. Eamon kept providing arrows, and Ito kept healing the wounded. After dealing with the smaller monsters, the leader ordered the two groups to descend from the walls, and they obeyed immediately, launching an attack together. Lynn used her magic to help everyone land safely. Abel and Phelps started attacking and finishing off the remaining monsters, but one of the monsters shot fire at them, which Warren blocked. Sheena used earth magic to make a barrier for them, allowing Phelps and Abel to finish the monsters off. Then a huge monster appeared, the goblin leader. Phelps thought everything would be over once they defeated this monster, but then two more huge monsters showed up. This meant there was a king waiting behind them. Abel decided to take one, had Phelps handle another, and told Sheena and Reha to take care of the last one. Abel said they needed to take down all the monsters before the king arrived. Abel dodged an attack from his monster, and Phelps managed to wound his. Reha then used magic to defeat the monster assigned to her. Abel succeeded in cutting off his own monster's hand, then sensed a major attack coming and told everyone to get down, which killed all the monsters nearby. Phelps wondered what that was, and Reha thought it was a windblade but stronger and faster than anything she had ever seen. Abel guessed it was just a swing of its arm. Then the huge monster appeared before them, the Goblin King. Abel and Phelps attacked it, landing several blows, but the king wasn't affected at all. Abel then used his full shadow fighting skills and managed to stab the monster, but it still didn't fall, just as Abel expected. He told Lynn to attack, and she unleashed a heavy barrage of spells on it, finally knocking it to the ground. The other adventurers cheered, and the leader felt a huge sense of relief. Phelps then asked if Lynn had been chanting Bullet Rain the whole time. Abel knew about this spell. It took a lot of time and could be considered their secret weapon, which greatly impressed Phelps. Lastly, we go back to Rio after he left the library. He said goodbye to Sarah and left afterwards.